Good early morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. This is John Massengale, and I'm sitting in the studio in Austin, Texas, along with my cohort Les Kaiser.
Good morning.
Jonathan Green is not going to be joining with us, but Bob Varsha is with us. Good morning, Mr. Varsha. How are you?
Good morning, y'all. I am confused as I try to rewrite my entire starting lineup for this race due to the overnight gearbox change for Antonio Giovinazzi. Valtteri Bottas has changed an engine, so he goes back to join the other fast guys, Leclerc and Verstappen at the back. This is going to be crazy, and there's a very strong chance of rain coming. So buckle up, Buttercup.
This is going to be fantastic, actually. I love it. The grid is a living, breathing animal, everything changing as we speak.
That's what Jonathan would say.
Yeah, speaking of Jonathan, he's not going to be joining us because he's doing some work this weekend. Jonathan is working for the Trans Am Series, and so he's up at VIR, so he's not going to join us this morning. But I think we can get along without him because it's going to be exciting. We got the Russian Grand Prix at Sochi, and Mr. Kaiser, you have seen how many Sochi races now, but what do you think of when you think of Sochi?
Not a great deal of elevation.
Yeah.
It really a very different personality. And even though they've been there, what is this, since 2014, I think, was the Olympics. They don't seem to have a grasp on it. Each time they show up, I feel like the drivers are kind of like, I'm not sure if I like this or not. And that to me is the quandary of it. I'd kind of like to be there to experience it for myself to see why they say that or why they say, what does or doesn't work for them.
Yeah. What about you, Bob Varsha?
Well, I agree. I think just every driver on the grid would admit that it's not his favorite racetrack. Russia can be a difficult place to travel, to get all that equipment and all the logistical stuff done. The track is dead flat. It's very hard to pick out the corners. It's a lot of go fast, then stop hard and turn slowly, that kind of thing. It's worth pointing out that this is the next to last race we'll see at this track in Sochi. They'll get one more year. And then there's a brand new racetrack being built near St. Petersburg, not far from the Finnish border, which will take over the Russian Grand Prix in 2023. So that should be something to look forward to. But Sochi is not real high on everybody's list of favorite racetracks, I have to say.
Well, I wonder if it's, what you said, it's the efforts it takes to get there and all the constraints of that country. I wonder if that really weighs very hard on it as opposed to the track itself. I mean, quite honestly, I feel like the track is probably one of the more boring tracks on the season calendar just because that go straight, turn left, go straight, turn right. Watch out for that one bump.
The one bump that's, as Bob put it yesterday, it's most of the elevation change in the entire circuit. You know what, though? We're not going to have to worry about any boring today because, like Bob said, there's a tremendous amount of change in the lineup already. It was already changing as of yesterday with all the engine changes and penalties and everything else. But you sprinkle in a little rain, which is looking inevitable. Let's just hope we don't get a repeat of Spa where we have a literal flood and deluge where we can actually race the race. But how about qualifying, gentlemen? Look at that grid to start this race, because when's the last time we've seen that, Bob? We got Lando, Carlos Sainz, and George Russell at the front of this race. How incredible is that?
That really is awesome. Having three guys at the front from three different teams, none of whom have ever won a race. According to the stat guru, Sean Kelly, this hasn't happened since the 1975 Swedish Grand Prix at Anderstorp, when the top three were Vittorio Brambilla, Patrick Depailler, and Jean-Pierre Jarier. So you got to be a bit of a gray hair as a Formula One fan to remember the last time we had a grid this jumbled. And as I was saying, I've been scrambling to try to make all the adjustments. I think I've got it right. Look at the back of the group. 17th, Bottas. 18th, Leclerc. 19th, Verstappen. I mean, those guys are going to be coming. And any rain is just going to complicate that. it's just going to be nuts. I mean, Lando Norris said it in his pole interview. He said, "This is not the track I would prefer to get my first pole at, or to get any pole at, because there's a long blast down to turn one. Huge difference between the clean and dirty lines on the racetrack." And he just knows, I mean, it's going to be a drag race down to turn one, and he's not sure he has the horses to be the first guy in that corner. Traditionally, the guy who leads at the first corner is either the first or third guy in line. In other words, the top two cars on the clean line. Carlos Sainz starts his Ferrari on the dirty line, and we heard him say yesterday, "I've got to do my homework. I got to figure out how to launch at this place, or otherwise I'm going to be, fifth at the first corner." So it's going to be worth watching. We've also had a lot of safety cars, first lap incidents at this track. They've raced there 7 times. They've had 5 first lap incidents calling for safety cars. So, brew the coffee and pop the corn, or whatever it is you're going to do. This is going to be something special, I think.
And well, one of the things, talking about the start. So historically, the winner comes from the first 3 grid spots, with the whole cats and dogs, mayhem thing going on. We'll see
Cats and dogs living together.
Yeah, that things all shook up at the beginning. We may break that trend, but George was apparently messing with signs. And Lando asking, so who do I get to tag along with and get away from here?
Yeah.
So, because that's a big part of the start of this race, trying to keep those 3 together. Those guys may actually team up to try to keep themselves out front and maintain that first 3 winner.
Well, you look at the grid. I mean, look at Carlos Sainz. He's starting in second place, and here's something else for him to think about. Right behind him is Lewis Hamilton, who has got to be driving with a little bit of anger this morning. He's got a point to make after crashing twice in qualifying yesterday. And behind Hamilton is Fernando Alonso, who is a lightning starter. So I can imagine Carlos Sainz is going to be watching his mirrors all the way down that front straightaway as he tries to get to turn 1 ahead of, this Oklahoma land rush. It's going to be amazing.
Bob, have you seen so much math trying to figure out the back of the grid? So it's right now, it's like, okay, so Bottas starts 16th, but ahead of Giovinazzi because he qualified ahead of him, and both would have been relegated beyond 20 at P20. And I mean, this is crazy, all these the changes. And Bob, talk about what you were talking about yesterday in our production call. Where the strategy of teams and how they're choosing to decide when to take these grid place penalties, because everybody's at that point in the season where they're having to do powertrain swaps.
Yeah, it's going to be critical in this stretch run to the championship. Every team is allowed, every driver is allowed 3 power units, basically 6 components. You're allowed 3 engines, and everybody's on the brink. And a bunch of guys have gone to a 4th engine, which incurs the penalty. You can change a couple of certain components and only go back 10 grid spots. But if you change the power unit in its entirety, you go all the way to the back. And that's what happened to Leclerc, who thinks they've plugged in a big update on the Ferrari engine that makes it better. And Verstappen, who got a fresh engine after all of the antics he's been involved in at Silverstone and Hungary and Monza with crashes and what have you. So teams have to decide, do we use an old engine out of our pool of 3, assuming one of them isn't any good because it's been used up or crashed out or whatever? When do we take that penalty? That everybody thought in Russia that Mercedes is so good here, let's let them go ahead and dominate the race weekend once again. We'll take the penalty. We weren't going to win the race anyway, so we'll do that. Now I wonder if some of that thinking has changed as they see Bottas going to the back, even though Valtteri's going to have a new Mercedes engine in there. They saw the troubles that Hamilton had in qualifying. They might have preferred, if they had a do-over, to go with another engine out of the pool and try to qualify in the top 5 or 6, because they'll be right there next to Lewis Hamilton. It's an interesting problem to have.
Well,
Yeah.
here's a revised starting grid from Formula One's Twitter. I'm assuming this is going to be the latest thing. It was 8 minutes ago, so we'll see if this is right. But Verstappen at the back in 20, then Latifi, then Giovinazzi, then Schumacher, Sonoda, Vettel. And wait a minute, where is Bottas? Okay, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. It's Verstappen 20th, Leclerc 19th, Latifi 18th, Bottas 17th, Giovinazzi 16th, Mazepin, Schumacher, Raikkonen, Sonoda, Gasly, Vettel, Ocon, Perez, Stroll, Alonso, Ricardo, Hamilton 4th, Russell 3rd, Sainz 2nd, and Norris on pole. So the back is what's been shaken up overnight. But I want to go back to Alonso because qualifying 6th, doesn't he just look fantastic right now? He just looks amazing to me.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's funny because we've started seeing these glimmers of years gone by for Alonso that I'm loving seeing that because he is a dominant force. He has been, just hadn't got on the right horse, I guess. And so this is where I feel like we're starting to see him come back. What about you, Bob?
Alonso?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a pretty amazing specimen. Consider the guy has twice stepped away from Formula One and come back. In the meantime, he, bid himself winning Le Mans, trying to win the Indy 500. It's Alonso's world, and we're all living in it. But even though he's one of the oldest drivers in the field, he may be the oldest driver. I think when Kimi hangs it up at the end of the season, he really is still there 100%. The reflexes are there. The desire appears to be there. And let's credit that Alpine team, the ex-Renault outfit, who languished, you might say, against Ferrari and Mercedes and Honda for a while. They have really come on strong. We all kind of questioned maybe signing Ocon for the extended period was a good idea. And then Ocon comes through and wins a race. I'm sure Alonso has that on his to-do list as well. Yeah, he's a remarkable driver, and we may not have seen the best of the two-time world champion yet.
Yeah, you think, was he excited about coming back? Because we thought at one point there, it looked like we were not going to get him back in Formula One. And when he first came back, I was like, oh, should he have even done this? Is this the right place? But you know what? It's been really fun watching him wring every bit he can out of the car and flashes of what we've seen. Not more than flashes, really, because he's been fantastic. So that has been one of the things that have been made this season so great. We've had such great racing, but we just had somebody tweet at us and talking about Lando Norris, right? His first pole ever, but saying that maybe he's the best driver in Formula One. I think there's at least the discussion to be had because, when you say that right now, you think back Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and then after that, the discussion kind of busts wide open. George Russell has been mentioned in all of that, but Lando Norris. What do you think, Les?
I'd bet on that. I would definitely bet on that. In another series, we might see the definitive answer. IndyCar being what it is, but Lando, youth, the excitement he's got, he's definitely delivered on all these things, and just the fact that he's so early in his career, I'll put my money on Lando.
Well, I will say this. Lando, you get guys who are 21 years old going up against guys like Alonso, who is 40 years old. It's pretty remarkable. You don't see that in a lot of different sports, and all racing at a comparatively equal level. It is kind of remarkable. And I would say this is probably, when Kimi leaves, this is going to be one of the youngest Formula One grids perhaps we've ever seen. A lot of early 20s in there. Look at Verstappen. Came into the sport as a teenager, and now he's got like 5 years or 6 years of experience, and he's 22, 21. That really is a remarkable thing.
No doubt. Well, we need to take a break, but I'm going to give out the phone number now. We got started, and hopefully everybody has a nice warm cup of coffee on this early Russian Grand Prix morning. But the phone number is 512-643-5483. We want your opinion on that subject as well, and anything else you want to talk about this morning. You're listening to Speed City, live from Austin, Texas, back after these messages.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
The phone number is 512-643-5483. Give us a call and join the show. But we want to start with a word from our sponsor. The Speed City F1 pre-race show on Sirius XM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Use the cloud to secure your team in the office, at the track, or anywhere with CrowdStrike at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. Gentlemen, I had in my notes 6 races ago, that we are watching for Lewis Hamilton's 100th career Formula Grand Prix win, and we are still waiting. And
I was going to say, producer, just cue up that same conversation. We're going to have some coffee.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for it.
Bob, it's just perfect. It's a perfect description of the state of the sport right now, right?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, things are so competitive now. I mean, Lewis would be the first to admit that it's not what it's been for Mercedes for the last 7 years when they've dominated. They've won this race in Sochi every year it's been held to this point. And Lewis's 100th win, like his 100th pole, was thought of as just fait accompli. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. And now look what's happened since. All these guys like Ocon getting their first win, Ricciardo coming back to the fore with a resurgent McLaren team. Suddenly Lewis is struggling, and he was the first to admit yesterday in those drying conditions in qualifying, he was trying too hard to get in the pit lane to get onto the slick tires that he thought were the thing to have in the closing minutes. And he hits the pit wall, and then he gets to his pit box, and they have to move him out of the way. They got to change his front wing, but his teammate Bottas is right behind him waiting to get on his slicks. They do that, push Lewis back, get him back out there. And then he crashes during qualifying because he couldn't get any heat into his tires. I mean, here's one of the best drivers in history, and he is having to use every arrow in his quiver, as it were, to try to maintain this dominant role that he's had in the World Championship for the last decade. That's just the way it is. Lewis is really going to have to earn that 100th win. It'll be a phenomenal achievement, like all that he's accomplished thus far, but they're not going to hand it to him.
I think he'll get there. I think right now, mentally, he's a bit rattled.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
And I think Sebastian next to Charles Leclerc, it rattled him. And I think we're on the way to seeing the same thing. I think Lewis just seeing the field of youngsters come up and hound on him's coattail here really have him rattled.
I know. We're so used to Lewis Hamilton being just virtually flawless on Saturday afternoon and Sunday, and he was not. And so we shall see. I'll tell you what, Las Vegas, we hadn't talked about this much in the last couple of years, but the betting odds are still choosing Lewis Hamilton, and this is as of like last night at 8:00. Lewis Hamilton are odds-on favorite to win, but yeah, I think that Hamilton did make a mistake, like you said, Bob, but that's not a question to me. He's going to get 100 wins. It's just a matter of when.
Oh, no. I'm sure he will. I mean, it'd be a heck of a story if he doesn't.
Yeah.
All righty, let's see. Vegas odds. You're bringing them up. -125.
I don't know how to read all those odds because I don't do sports betting. But
well, that looks familiar to my checkbook, so I recognize that number.
You recognize that?
It's football season. Everybody knows how to read odds during football season.
Well, in football season, it's always the Cowboys are favored by 2 or whatever. But this is I don't know. It's just a whole different thing. And I don't do any betting, so I don't know. But I do know that they're saying that Lewis Hamilton is still odds-on favorite to win the Russian Grand Prix. But well, guys, I want to touch on something because we're talking about Lewis Hamilton, I'm talking about all these young guys, right? Well, Lando Norris becomes the 102nd driver to take a pole position in Formula One. It's hard to imagine that many, but this being his very first one, I was watching him, and he seems really humble too. He was talking about that he was thanking the team and talking about how he still got some things to work on, but you got to look at that lap, and it was really phenomenal, wasn't it?
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what, this track is still going to tax these drivers way beyond, what most of us daily driver folks do.
And speaking of some interesting stats like that, this is the first Sochi pole for a team other than Mercedes or Ferrari,
Hmm.
which I guess, you know,
Again,
yeah.
it shows you how things have changed, how much more competitive things are gotten. Um, it's uh, it's just like a whole new Formula One than what we've seen in recent years.
Some other good stats. And Bob, it's funny. These are stats from Formula One's website, but they're also from Virtual Statman. And Sergio Perez starts ninth, 5 places lower than he did last year. But here's an interesting one. Pierre Gasly fails to reach Q3 for only the 3rd time this season. He's had such a great season. And Latifi progresses to Q2 for only the 3rd time in the last 4 races. So lots of interesting stats. And I guess this time of season, you're going to see some of this stuff with grid penalties and engine changes and all that. Um, but Les, what else is jumping out at you today? What about the Haas F1 team? They're slowly moving up the grid, even as we speak, overnight because of some of the grid changes.
Yeah, I think that'll be a help. I think everybody, here's the thing I'll say about the entire grid change overnight. We know those people in the back are faster than where they're sitting on the grid. So I think it's going to be a stampede towards the front. And, like we've seen so many times, do you argue? Do you try to battle with these guys belong so far ahead of you? Or do you let them pass safely and just maintain your race? I think the wiser call is just to maintain your race, go as fast as you can, let the ones that clearly outclass you and outrun you go get back in their place.
But there are fewer of those guys out there. I mean, who was complaining? Verstappen in Friday practice was complaining that he couldn't get by guys because he couldn't, he didn't have the performance differential that you need to be able to pass another guy because the field has gotten so much more competitive. So coming from the back, even for a guy like a Bottas or a Verstappen or Leclerc, is going to be easier said than done around this racetrack. It's almost as though the track designer knew how long to make the straights between the braking areas so that you could get alongside a guy but not quite past him. It's going to be really interesting. And factoring into all of this as well is the fact that this is one of the longest pit stop deltas of the year. It's right around 25 seconds. So you don't want to pit more than once to satisfy the tire rule in a dry race, unless you have to. And if it rains, of course, all the plans go out the window and you've got the wets and the intermediates to deal with. And a lot of those intermediates got used up in qualifying. So, it's everybody's going to earn their money today, I got to say. And again, it's no guarantee that the guys at the back are going to be able to come forward. I mean, look at qualifying. Everybody thought you get on the soft red slicks at the end and you're going to blow away Lewis's provisional pole time that was set on intermediates, but only 3 drivers managed to do it. Yeah, they looked spectacular out there and they were all adjusting for the back end stepping out and all that sort of thing. But really, only the 3 guys on the grid ahead of Lewis were able to go faster than he did on the intermediate tires. So you factor that in as well. The performance gap on those drives, assuming you get to use them, is not so great. But at all costs, you've got to stay out of the pits. And that includes, taking off your front wing end plate or something like that in one of these tight corners.
Well, I'll say, the great equalizer we're looking at, we've already heard rain is 80% in the forecast for race time. So that'll make a big difference, and that will certainly impede everybody from getting past. Not only performance, getting the traction to the ground will be a big part of it, but if not likely, but anyway, the tire strategy most likely was a single stop, starting out on a medium, going 17 to 22 laps, according to Pirelli's guesstimate, and wrapping up on the hard lap or on the hard tire for the rest of the laps. And so I have a feeling none of that's really going to matter.
You mean all this talk, all this speculation?
Yeah.
What
Thanks,
are we here
Pirelli.
for?
It's going to rain. We should have just asked the weatherman instead of Pirelli.
Well, I am looking at the television. We do have cars on track for warm-up lap. Lando Norris went out first, of course, and there is no rain at the moment. It looks very gray, but there is no rain currently. So we shall see. And I think if we get just a little bit of rain in turn one, we could start the race in a pile of mayhem. But let's just hope we get lots of good racing, but a little rain to sprinkle things up a little bit. But Bob, what about down the grid a little bit in between? You got guys like Sebastian Vettel and others in the middle of the grid. This could be an interesting race for some of these guys in the midfield today, couldn't it?
Yeah, I've got my eye on Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. I mean, here's a guy who has been in the third qualifying session, Q3, for most of the season, but he wasn't able to make it here in Sochi. And he was furious with his team afterwards because he felt they kept him on a set of used intermediate tires in the drying conditions, and he wasn't able to unlock the potential that he feels is there. So since it was wet yesterday in qualifying, everybody has free choice of tires. None of the old rule that you had to start on the set of tires. You set your fast time in Q2 if you're in the top 10. I think Gasly has something. I think he thinks he has something for the field. So he'll be one of those midfield guys who's going to be interesting to watch, along with Vettel, Ocon, Sergio Perez. I mean, look, a guy who's used to qualifying up front at Sochi, and here he is back in ninth. Well, he'll be eighth after Bottas takes his 10th spot or goes to the back with his engine change. Perez is critical to Red Bull this weekend. If Verstappen cannot come through, which is a possibility, as I mentioned earlier, they've got to get points out of somebody after the dry stretch they've been going through. And Perez has got to be that guy. That's what he's hired for. He's got to pick up the pieces when his team leader can't get it done. So he'll be fun to watch too.
Thinking about the gap between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez all season long, it's been pretty noticeable, right? The number like half a second almost comes to mind for a lot of the circuits. But we had that gentleman tweet at us earlier about saying, is Lando Norris the best driver in Formula One now? Or can he be in that conversation, I think was what he said. But look at the gap between Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, who qualified fifth. Again, close to that half a second. And it's been that way all season. And, Daniel Ricciardo got his first win at McLaren last week, full of confidence, comes in, and he's still a half a second behind Lando Norris. Bob, what do you think? I mean, you think that that it's comparable to the Max Verstappen situation?
No, I don't think so. Not quite yet. I mean, Lando Norris, for all that he's done, and it's a lot, hasn't earned that number one driver right. You've got a race winner in Daniel Ricciardo, most recently at the last round at Monza, and Norris hasn't won anything but a pole thus far. Granted, they may be equal in skills, but I don't think McLaren is going to allow them the privilege that Red Bull grants to Verstappen vis-a-vis Perez. So, it's all part of the mystery of team chemistry and number one versus number two and how the team principals choose to strategize. But again, it's a nuance of Formula One that's fun to watch. And I think Norris knows that he's got a target on his back today. And whatever the conditions turn out to be, he's got to be very careful down there into turn one. And Ricciardo will try to avoid him coming from fifth. Remember, Ricciardo is in that dry, clean line behind him. Mm-hmm. So Ricciardo will be coming forward. And he's another, like Alonso, a really quick starter. So,
well, that's what I'm hoping for, is we get a freight train on the clean line just to shake things up.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we need to grab a quick break, and we'll get this break in. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion about the Formula One Russian Grand Prix at Sochi. You listen to Speed City, back after these messages.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
It's not quite urgent yet, but we're about 25 minutes from the start of the race. And I just read a radar report. It says the FIA radar says no no rain expected before the race, but increasing chance of light rain at 1500, which coincidentally is the start of the formation lap. So the timing is perfect. So we'll
Have at it, boys.
yeah.
Bring your wellies.
Yes, sir. Well, let me go ahead and get a word in from our sponsor. Has your workforce moved from the office to the home or to the garage, or maybe a rented cabin with open Wi-Fi? If your company has expanded outside the office and moved all your applications to the cloud, there's a whole new world of threats you have to worry about, including ransomware. CrowdStrike revolutionized security by harnessing the speed and power of the cloud to identify and stop the most advanced cyber attacks, even those that have never been seen before. So now you can work securely anywhere. Try CrowdStrike Falcon free today and protect your data and employees anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere. CrowdStrike, we stop breaches. Access the CrowdStrike Falcon platform free at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. Well, Bob, we are about 20 or so minutes away. So can you give us a fantastic Bob Varsha rundown of the grid?
How can I do that? Like everybody else, I tore up my grid from yesterday when all these guys started changing positions, but I'll give it a shot. Let's look at the rundown. Lando Norris starts from his first career pole. He's the fifth youngest driver to take a pole. And interestingly, as to my point earlier about how young the field is getting, the four guys who were younger than he when they took their first pole are all in this race. So it's Norris next to Carlos Sainz, his first front row start in the Ferrari. Behind them on row 2, George Russell, alongside Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes. Daniel Ricciardo, Norris's teammate at McLaren, starts inside on row 3 next to Fernando Alonso in the Alpine. Lawrence Stroll, who's been struggling so much of late, is in the 7th spot, out-qualifying his teammate, the 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. Alongside Stroll is Sergio Perez, who needs to be a lot higher. Moving back to row 5, Esteban Ocon in the 2nd Alpine, alongside the aforementioned Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin. On row 6, Pierre Gasly, who hopefully has calmed down, but I imagine he'll be a rocket coming on the clean line at the start, alongside his teammate, Yuki Sonoda in the 2nd AlphaTauri. On row 7, Kimi Räikkönen in his final Russian Grand Prix for Alfa Romeo, or anybody else for that matter, alongside Mick Schumacher up there in 14th place. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for my voice to crack there. I'm not that surprised by it, but given all the shuffling, no surprise to see Mick Schumacher there in the Haas Ferrari. Back on row 8, his teammate, Nikita Mazepin in the 2nd Haas, alongside Valtteri Bottas, who took the engine change, but finds himself in 16th place. Antonio Giovinazzi in the 2nd of the Alfa Romeos, starts from the 17th spot on the inside of row 9, alongside Nicolas Latifi in the Williams, another engine change drop back. And on the 10th and final row, Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, with what is supposed to be a hopped up power unit that Carlos Sainz, his teammate, does not have, up there on row 1. And Leclerc starts alongside the championship leader, Max Verstappen, in the Red Bull Honda in the 20th spot.
So are you saying Leclerc has the Ferrari engine from 2019? Is that?
Don't you think somebody in the pit lane is probably wondering that? Apparently it's an energy store. They got a more powerful battery and yada, yada, yada. Let's see.
Let's welcome, while you're looking, Bob, I'm going to welcome a couple people on Twitter. William Ricker has sent us an icon of his coffee. He's got his coffee started, and coffee and toast, he said. He's ready to go. Our usual crowd is trickling in a little late this morning, and I don't blame you. The 5 a.m. alarm went off a little early this morning, but I've jumped out of bed because I was excited to see the grid.
Yeah, I feel for the guys out there in Long Beach. All the IndyCar guys, I'm sure, want to be watching this race, but few of them will probably be able to do it. They've got a long day ahead of them in the finale for the IndyCar series.
You know, we've got a bunch of Formula One groups that get together. Like in San Francisco, I think they've got a big one out there. They've called in before. Yep. And yeah, early race for them for sure. But yeah, there's a couple of groups out there like that. So that,
oh yeah.
Yeah, if any of you guys are listening, welcome. And we're excited about the race as well.
I met some of the guys out of the LA group.
When I was doing television, at Speed, or Speed Vision, as we were originally called, we started doing a shout out, asking people to call us in if they were in a group of people up in the wee hours watching Formula One. And we got a surprising number of groups all over the country, and up in Canada. It was fascinating. I was interested in doing that because I used to follow Formula One with a group here in Atlanta. Granted, we're on the East Coast, so we had an easier shot than you guys in the middle of the country, much less the folks out west. But restaurants that normally wouldn't be open at that hour, you could probably strike a deal with a local tavern to not only get you coffee, but maybe serve you breakfast while you were up at dark 30 watching F1.
Yeah, some breakfast tacos if you're here in Austin.
Yeah, it's anything in a
go.
tortilla.
Hey, we've got a message from Alex on YouTube. Yeah, in case you don't know, we do we stream it to YouTube, stream the show as well as Facebook. But Alex says, he said, you know what? I'm going to shoot this one to you, Les. What can you expect from Haas in 2022, and can Haas compete for the middle of the pack?
Okay, if I were a betting man, I think we're going to see an improvement. To be quite honest, I'm kind of cringe over the idea of keeping the two drivers that we have this year. But then also there's the Russian money that's going to help support the development and the team to keep going. I think Gene Haas is not going to tolerate not getting some improvements.
No, I'm not Gene. I'm Gunther.
Yeah, well, Gunther, I appreciate that. But to be quite honest, I wonder if it's going to matter next year whether I say Gunther or not.
Oh, wow. I've not heard anybody. You mean as in Gunther might not be there?
Right.
Huh.
He's had long enough. Gene is not a tolerant man for this. I wonder if Gene's fuse has gotten to the end of this for Gunther.
That thought did cross my mind at some point earlier this year, but
they've changed everybody else.
Yeah. Bob Varsha, what do you think? That first of all, I want to, Les, you didn't really go into the heart of the question about what do we expect? Do we expect them to move up? Are they going to not be last on the grid? Let's start with that.
I'd say they'll still be towards the back. Last, maybe not.
Okay, well that was. But you didn't really go out on any
No,
limbs there.
that's where I'm not. That's not the limb I'm going out on. The one is I'm watching what happens to Gunther,
that's
which
interesting.
I love having him around. I
know
enjoy his personality. He's absolutely dedicated to the sport. He's taken a lot of beatings for his decisions, but like I said, that's where I stand on that. I want him to stick around the area.
Is that a pretty monumental task? What do you think, Bob?
Well, I agree with Les. I think a leadership change would be good for Haas. So much is going to depend on the car they have next year, when all the cars will be completely new, clean sheet of paper jobs. I have thought that Gunther, kind of did not exercise the kind of authority that could have helped this team when it was lost in the wilderness. They have some financial stability now, as long as Nikita Mazepin's dad is pumping funding into the team. There were rumors that Gene Haas might sell to Mazepin's dad. I don't think that's going to happen, but Schumacher's there for a reason, and that's because he's part of the Ferrari Academy. Mazepin's there because of the funding provided by his dad. I do think they need some help. And, if you think about some of the management changes up and down the pit lane recently, I mean, McLaren brought in Andreas Seidel from the uber successful Porsche sports car programs. And Williams brought in Jost Capito, who worked with the VW group. You need to go wherever the good people are and get them, even if they're not in Formula One right now. I think Gene Haas would do well to take a look out there and find a real leader, a real organizer, and bring them in. As Les said, Gunther Steiner's a great guy. He's had a great career, but I don't think he's right for Haas anymore if they're going to take that next step.
Very interesting. And Bob, maybe Gene should be thinking about some of this organization, some of this leadership in the United States. And who knows, maybe from within his own organization, or, there is the rumor. I keep calling this rumor, but it's not a rumor, of Michael Andretti putting together a team. It's not a rumor. He said he's doing it. And in fact, I think he put the Haas team on his list of teams he wants to purchase. And who knows what could happen. But I'm not going to argue with it. Gunther has been such a fun character to watch on Netflix, and we've had him on the show numerous times. And it's not that I think he's like some horrible leader, but it's certainly worth considering. So, yeah, thanks, Alex, on YouTube for that question, because that sparked a whole other conversation. Guys, let's get our last break in, because we're about 15 minutes from the start of the race, and we'll get this break in, and we'll take some more of your calls, 512-643-5483, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. You listen to Speed City live from Austin, back after a quick break.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Okay, we're 12 or 13 minutes from the start of the Formula One Sochi Grand Prix, the Russian Grand Prix at Sochi. And I'm watching the cameras pan down the grid, and we get to the back, and we got that unusual sight with Red Bull and Ferrari at the back of the grid. Bob Varsha, what do you think? Do you think, let's just say we have a dry race, do you think we can have a fantastic show with Max and Charles Leclerc coming from the back and fighting for a win? Do you think that's possible?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's possible, especially if it rains. Now, along with that, guys have to stay out of each other's way. They have to have a race and not a parade behind a safety car. So if everybody can mind their P's and Q's and stay out of each other's race cars, I think it'll be a spectacular race. There's nothing quite like seeing fast guys trying to come through the field, a little bit of rain mixed in. And it sounds like what they're talking about is that sort of misting light rain, which means you have to make very hard decisions about when the crossover point comes, when you need to go from dry, slick tires to the intermediates or even the full wets. If it's just misting, that's more of a problem than if it comes down in a substantial amount that makes the decision for you. We've got to have this wet tire or that wet tire. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting race in store here.
And I just saw a tweet from Formula One that says excitement is building down there. We're racing really soon. And it made me think of the excitement in Austin, Texas right now, because we've got the USGP now. We're inside of 30 days because the USGP in Austin, the weekend of the 24th is coming up, and Austin is a buzz right now. We've got MotoGP coming to Circuit of the Americas next weekend. So it's been really exciting to see people get excited for the USGP. They're mostly sold out for tickets here. And in fact, there's only a handful left. I think they've only got like single-day tickets left. I know you can't buy a 3-day pass anymore.
Yeah, they are pretty much toast on all the most desirable tickets like that. But, call back in after the race. Join us in the conversation. I think we have a pair to give away.
You stole my thunder. That's exactly right, because we're going to give away another pair of tickets to the USGP here in Austin in the post-race show. Write the phone number down, 512-643-5483, because we want to get your take on the race, of course, and anything else in Formula One you want to talk about. But and you can call before the race, but after the race, we do have those tickets. But let's see what else, gentlemen. We are about 10 minutes out. You mentioned something, Bob. Lance Stroll, he has looked good in these conditions, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. And he's got a history of that sort of thing. He likes the wet. And he's been through a dry patch. He hasn't had the performance that I think he wanted. He could do some damage today. And it'd be good to see the young Canadian, getting back on terms. We know what he's capable of. He has a pole of his own. And, a podium today would be a nice compliment to his comeback this season.
I was just looking down the grid. Pierre Gasly, we talked about him just a little bit earlier, and his teammate Yuki Sonoda. Bob, I don't think we touched on this in the last couple of weeks. What do you think about Yuki Sonoda and him coming back? He's obviously such a young kid. What do you think about him and him coming back to the team?
Well, the team has a lot of confidence in the young Japanese kid. Of course, he made a big impact when he got here in his first race or two, and then kind of fell off a cliff, crashed in practice, crashed in qualifying, couldn't quite come to terms with things. The team had him move to northern Italy near Faenza, where the team is based, so they could keep more tabs on his lifestyle and his diet and his sim work and all that kind of thing. I think the talent is still there. And the fact that we haven't talked about him much, or anybody else talked about him for that matter, is probably good for him because he's very young, very talented, and he needs to sort of run in the shade of his teammate Pierre Gasly for a while, seeing what Gasly can do with the car, seeing how he can match that performance by perhaps changing his driving style or his setup. So I think this is good for Sonoda. And it's good that we have a Japanese driver in Formula One, just as it's good if Alpha comes through with the rumor, which is that we will have a Chinese driver in that team. The one remaining seat in Formula One could go to, and I know I'm going to mangle his name, but it's Guangzhou, I believe. Very strong F2 runner right now. He's in Sochi this weekend as they come close to the end of their season. Oh, and congratulations, by the way, to Logan Sargent, who won one of the F3 races on Friday.
Yeah.
An American got his first win of the year.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I saw that. And yeah, we've been watching him. Is an American in FIA F3, really 2 steps away from Formula One, and we got an American winning a race. What were you going to say, Les?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to Yuki because there were questions this week raised in one of the groups that does he deserve his place on the grid? Looking at his history, he came up through the Japanese F4 series. He then moved into the FIA F3 series. He's raced at Macau in the Grand Prix that Jonathan's done since Dark Ages. And
Dawn of Time.
There you go. He did run TRS and F2 in 2020. That was with Carlin. Carlin has a great history of getting these names that may not be on the tip of your tongue and getting them up into the right place, whether they come to IndyCar or they go to F1. But, he's done well. Just for those, the FIA F2, he took 3rd place in 2020. In the TRS series, he took 4th in 2020. I think he's earned his spot.
He strikes me as he just needs to percolate a little bit. Like Bob said, he now has, it's funny to say this, the veteran Pierre Gasly to model after a little bit, but he feels like a good choice to me. I think he just needs to settle in and get it all figured out. And I have confidence in him, and I can't really, obviously his past, you can't get to Formula One without doing well.
Right.
And so I just feel like he's probably there. Hey, Bob, I did some research last night. Apparently, the Chinese driver you mentioned, the pronunciation that I've seen the most is Guan Yu Zhou. That's how they're pronouncing the last name, like Joe. So we'll keep it
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know 100% if that's right, but I think that's right.
Or perhaps I should say Shishi.
There you go.
There you go. Hey, we haven't talked about the driver with the home race today. We've talked about Haas, but we haven't talked about Mazepin at his home race.
Hey, and we can still call him Mazepin this weekend.
Because he hasn't spun yet,
right.
You mean? Okay.
So we only do that when he spins.
Okay.
On the weekends that he spins, and he's still clear. So.
I saw that he was involved this week in a charity, and I'm hoping that next year, going back to that question we got off YouTube, that Haas does do better, and considering how well Haas did in the first few years of their existence, I have some hope that they could be competitive. Because look at the midfield now. It's so packed full of, you never know who's going to be at the top of that midfield. But going back to Mazepin, I think he has probably learned some lessons this year from early on, and we got to give these guys a little bit of slack about the way they perform in that car, because let's face it, the car's miserable right now, and no one all the way to the top of that organization will argue that the car's not miserable. Don't you agree, Bob, that we got to cut these guys a little bit of slack?
Yeah, I agree. They're in. They're trying to advance their careers. They're doing the best they can, and you're right about the car. Looking at Schumacher and Mazepin, particularly the Russian, in the wet conditions. Schumacher was almost 8 seconds off the pole pace. Mazepin almost 12 seconds off. So. The combination of driver, engine, tires, team, yada, 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 just doesn't reflect well on anybody there. a lot of work to be done at Haas.
All right, gentlemen, we're about 3 minutes till we go out to the BBC for their race coverage. So I think I want to go into some predictions. I'm going to start with you, the Texan, Mr. Les Kaiser. What do you think is going to happen today?
Lando Daniel.
Lando Daniel. Okay. A dual podium for McLaren.
Yeah, I want to see it again.
All right, what about these guys in the back? You don't think anybody's going to?
Oh, I think there'll be some hard charging, but it's going to get wet. And that's where I think the talent of Kimi is going to show, and he'll be a hard charger today.
All right. Bob Varsha, what about your predictions for today?
Wow. Having given this no thought at all, I will say Hamilton, Norris, Russell.
Okay. Yeah, can't argue with that. All right, I'm going to go out on a limb. You guys have taken up all the obvious ones. Everybody's starting near the front. I'm going to say that
Mazepin?
No, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go out on that limb. but I am going to say that we're going to have a massive rain, and Lance Stroll is going to get the win today in Russia. And after that, I don't know. Let's say it's an all Aston Martin 1-2, Lance Stroll, Sebastian Vettel, and Fernando Alonso. How about that? I better write this down because
hold on. Lance Stroll, according to Vegas, is let's see, 10,000 to 1.
Okay,
Wow.
Where's my wallet? I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, and put at least $1 on Lance Stroll to win.
Yeah, Lando was only 275.
Hey, stranger things have happened because we obviously have rain predicted for sure, at least some sort of rain, and there's a good chance of it. I'm just looking at the screen right now. There is no rain yet, so we'll see what happens. But we do have about a minute left, so let me touch on a couple things real quick. Number one, make sure you tune in after the race because we want your opinions. Because we're going to have at least an hour post-race show, unless we get one of those spa-type situations. Then I don't know what's going to happen. But the phone number, write it down because we want your opinions on the post-show. The phone number is 512-643-5483, 512-643-LIVE. And I want to know if we got anybody out there traveling today because we've had some really good people listening on SiriusXM traveling. I want to see if you got any of those people traveling and call in. But we're going to go ahead and throw it out to the BBC now because we're about 30 seconds from their coverage. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on Facebook, on YouTube, and we will talk to you after the race.
Ciao, y'all.
Cheers.